Hello and welcome to the alumni series of the Marketing Practice podcast.
Tune in every fortnight when we will be bringing you an interview with one of the alumni from the MDP.
Find out where they are today, how the MDP has helped them in their career to date, and some of their fondest memories from their time on the MDP.
If you're interested in finding out more about the MDP, check us out on social media.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you shared this with your friends who might be interested in finding out about life on the MDP.
This week on the show, we are joined by Aoife Bolger, Marketing and Communications Executive at Fáilte Ireland. Aoife is also the winner of the Young Marketer Award at the Irish instalment of the Cannes Young Lions competition for 2020. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the show.
So, hi Aoife, thanks so much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to hearing all about your time at the MDP and your career updates. So I suppose just to get us started, would you mind just telling us your name, a little bit about yourself and where you're working at the moment, what you're doing?
Of course. Hello, and thank you for having me. This is very strange. My name is Aoife, obviously. I am a Galway girl. I went to NUIG here and studied commerce, specialising in marketing in my final year. And while I was in NUIG, I had a job in this really busy bar and restaurant called Busker Brown's in Galway. So worked there throughout college, and to be honest, kind of felt I learned more about what area I wanted to go into in college while I was there. I would have dealt a lot with kind of brand reps and that kind of thing, which was really what exposed me to, I suppose, marketing, and why I decided to specialise in marketing in my final year. And yeah, after I finished my degree, I hadn't actually had the opportunity to have any proper work placement or anything like that. So I decided to stay on working in Buskers in a full-time kind of position to save up some money after college. And I also sought out an internship in this little PR marketing agency called Food PR in Galway. So they kind of represent a lot of hospitality, food and beverage clients, like chefs like JP McMahon and that. So I suppose it was really good because without me realizing it, I was developing a bit of a niche for kind of hospitality, tourism and marketing in that space. And yeah, then I went on to do the MDP. Well, I set my sights on getting into the MDP that year and went through the very rigorous interview process that we've all been through, and was delighted I secured a place on that, which I'm sure we'll talk about the year that was lots. But it was definitely invaluable to me, and certainly was such a good setup and got me to where I am today, which is I am now working on the marketing communications team in Fáilte Ireland.
Lovely. Okay, cool. Great. So yeah, we'll get on to Fáilte Ireland a little bit later, but I suppose for now, just focusing on the MDP. So I suppose you said you had your kind of background there in commerce and marketing, and you kind of maybe had your eye kind of set on going into the MDP. What were your expectations going into it? Did you have certain interests? I know you mentioned tourism and the food industry, and is that kind of what you focused on when you were in the MDP? What were you hoping to get out of it?
Funny, really. I suppose I knew when I was working that year in particular after college that I definitely didn't want to go back into academics as such. I knew I didn't want to go and do a thesis or get my head back into the books. And I've always been quite a kind of a hands-on, hardworking person, and I definitely realised that when I was working in Buskers, as I said. So the big thing for the MDP for me was the kind of active learning, hands-on approach, and working with real clients. I kind of felt, I suppose I went to college, I wouldn't say I was old, but I was 23, and I was I just have no interest in doing any more, I suppose, education or back to the books. And then I suppose as well, I felt that when I was doing it, I wanted to do it right, and I wanted to go to Smurfit, and I wanted to get I had heard about the MDP from a girl that had gone 2 years before me, and I knew she was doing really well, and I could see kind of from her social media and stuff kind of the things they had been up to. But honestly, going into it, expectations I didn't have any. I knew that I was going to work with real clients. that was about it. I knew I was going to have to wear a suit or like a formal attire. I think it was only really when I went for the interview that I was like, oh, holy God. I was like, this is, you know, a level far above what I am at the moment. And if I can get into that course and put my all into it, I believe that I will come out all the better for it.
Yeah.
So expectations, didn't really have any, but very quickly when I was there, and anybody who's been through it obviously knows about the induction process at the beginning. I was a couple of days into induction and I was kind of questioning everything, and I was like, okay, well, I haven't paid yet, so maybe I can still pull out. But then I think it was on like the third day or so, Damien was, you know, talking about marketing in general and the MDPs that have gone, and I was like, okay, I'm going to put my all into this. I'm a big believer in like what you put into something you get out of it, so I was like, I'm going to commit, I'm going to learn as much as I can while I'm here. And then I didn't try and focus on food and like food or anything like that. I was like, I'm putting my all into every experience I can and learn. So yeah, that was kind of my approach to it, which I loved every minute of.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a really hands-on masters, and as you said there, the first few weeks of induction can be quite overwhelming. But yeah, I suppose then, you know, obviously the work aspect to it, it is really hard working. But like, what would be your fondest memory of your time at the MDP?
Oh, it's so hard. Like, I think it's funny because while you're there for work and you're there to learn and develop, and like, I mean, for me anyway, it was invaluable, obviously, to my professional development, but like even more so to my personal development. Um, and that's because of the people that you're with, and I suppose the group dynamics that you're exposed to. Um, I've recently gotten into, through my manager at work, gotten into listening to Brené Brown and her whole like the power of vulnerability. And I suppose reflecting back on the MDP, you spend the entire year being vulnerable, and like everybody on that course sees every single facet of you, good and bad, in high pressure situations. And it is like the little moments with team members when I look back that just bring me such joy. Like, I was even talking to Ross from our course yesterday. I said I was chatting to you today, and he was just, we were just talking about a couple of different things, and he was like, do you remember when we were working on the blenders project and we're talking about this? And he was like, and do you remember you arrived back that evening with a bowl full of cut up carrots and hummus? I've never been so happy in my life. It was just the little moments along the way. Yeah. Just the team, like, we set out with every project being like, oh my God, this is a mammoth task. It's like climbing Everest. How are we ever going to achieve this? I don't know how to write the proposal. I don't know what the issue is. I don't know what to do. And then every little step along the way, like once you complete your surveys, or like, it's just such a win, or I don't know, I think it's the team aspect and just really getting to know what your strengths are on a team so that you know how to, I suppose, bring those into new experiences.
Yeah,
there was millions of little memories. I'm always thinking of them, but I struggle to think of one big one. One big one actually was, we went on a team bonding or a group bonding weekend away, and the whole class came down to Galway. So I was, obviously being from Galway, part of the organisation of it. Yeah. And I was like, okay, what can we do now on the Saturday? We're all strapped for cash. Like, none of us have part-time jobs. Like, we can't afford to go drinking all day. Like, what can we do? So I was like, I know what we'll do. We'll rent a bus and we'll go climb Diamond Hill. All been out the night before. Everybody's on the bus on the way out to Connemara. It's absolutely lashing rain. Everybody hates me. Like, they're literally like, what has she signed us up for? And then it was like being on a project or doing anything. Like, I was like, oh no, this is horrendous. But then the sun came out when we got there, and everybody had such a sense of achievement when we did it and got down. And it was just that, like, camaraderie, I suppose, with each other. So yeah, and I mean, still, like, we still talk all the time, and it's so good going through those experiences with such like-minded people, even though everybody is very different and brings a different, I suppose, skill set to team situations. But you're always going to have that core group of people that are at the same kind of career level as you, which is just brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is that's really nice, and definitely can relate to that. Like even from first semester alone, having been on a few projects that were um tough to say the least. It's kind of those moments, even look back now, that I'm like, oh, that was actually kind of fun. In a weird way, they're kind of fun, and you look back and there's some of your fondest memories. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten to go away yet, but I'm sure we'll get that maybe in a when things open up a bit or whatever. But look, now obviously you're working in tourism. How did you kind of know to move into that space after the MDP? Obviously, we were kind of chatting beforehand about how there's such a competition for jobs and everyone's kind of looking at different areas and applying to everything. Did you just kind of fall into it, or was it something that you were saying, oh, I've always wanted to work there, I'm going to go for it?
So actually, no, not at all. What happened was, like I said, like had our heads stuck in the projects the whole time, hadn't really come up for air to think about, oh, what's happening next, because it is very hard to kind of take a step back and be like, oh, this isn't going to go on forever. Like I'm actually only here for 11 months or a year, whatever it is. But as I mentioned, I had worked in buskers prior to the MDP, and while I was there, something that I was involved in that I loved was Coca-Cola were doing market research with bartenders, because they have Schweppes as one of their brands, and they were trying to come up with like how they could compete with Fever Tree, because Fever Tree were overtaking the market. And I just absolutely loved being on the other side of that for them and all that. So me going into the MDP, I was like, dream job coming out of this. I'm going to go into Jameson. I'm going to go into Diageo. I mean, obviously, I'm just going to sail right in. It's not going to be any issue. Why would it be? Like, I have the perfect skill set. Like, yeah, easy peasy. That's what's going to happen. And then as time went on, I kind of started to realize that it wasn't exactly as simple as that. And I absolutely loved the mentor program. I don't know if you guys are doing that this year, but a really good piece of advice that one of our mentors gave us was to constantly be thinking of, I suppose, kind of like your 5-year trajectory. So at that point, I kind of switched my focus, and I was like, right, if I want to be a brand manager in Diageo or a brand manager in 5 years' time, what is the experience that I need to have? And I started looking at job specs for those jobs. And that was when I saw that a lot of the experience that they look for is either in food and beverage or tourism. And it was when I saw the word tourism, I was like, oh, I mean, that resonates with me so much. I'm from the west of Ireland. I've always holidayed in Ireland. As I mentioned, I'd done that internship. And as part of that, I had been exposed to the work of Fáilte Ireland. And I just knew that it was definitely an industry that I could be really passionate about. Also was very aware of like the Wild Atlantic Way and the brands that Fáilte Ireland have, and thought it was a bit different, I suppose. So it really excited me. And it was from that point, I suppose, around the February maybe of the MDP, that I had my sights set, and I was constantly checking Fáilte Ireland, Tourism Ireland job updates. And that was actually how it happened for me. So it definitely kind of happened out of the blue while trying to get somewhere else, if that makes sense, which is funny.
Yeah.
Okay, and now that you're like in Fáilte Ireland, like, is that 5-year trajectory, has that changed much, or how is it still looking,
Well, yeah, I suppose it's funny because I obviously went into my job knowing that I was going into a marketing communications team, and possibly not really knowing, like, I thought anyway, maybe you guys don't, maybe you're a lot more wise than I was, but I was like, okay, when I leave the MDP, sure, I'm going to know exactly what's going on. I'm going to know exactly how to do a job. I mean, but pretty soon I started to realize, I was like, I know that this is a really tough year, and I know that what I'm working on is great real life experience, but I don't actually know what I'm qualified to do. Like I was a bit confused, if you know what I mean. Like I was kind of like, you develop so many skills that, you could go into project management, you could go into sales, you could go into business development, you could go into any area. And I was always, I suppose, on the projects that we did, I was really got a buzz out of kind of finding insights and consumer behavior, and I knew I wanted to go down the creative side of things. So it was that about the job in Fáilte Ireland that I knew that I'd be exposed to, I suppose, the creative development process of campaigns. That was why I wanted to go to Fáilte Ireland. And then I was just so happy when I got on the team and realized that there was such an emphasis on everybody on the team being involved in creative strategy from beginning to end, because I'd heard so much about how sometimes you get into teams as like in an entry role in your career, and you kind of get siloed, or you're stuck doing like just social media, or you're stuck in one area. So I quickly realized on my team that I did have the opportunity to kind of see the end-to-end process of I suppose creative strategy, which I just loved, and have been so fortunate since to be able to kind of, I suppose, show where I can add value and prove myself that way. And the skills from the MDP absolutely are what enabled me to do so. So I'm kind of like, I love where I am. I love the industry. I'm very committed to it. And as long as I continue to learn, I'm happy where I am. I'm definitely a believer in like, as long as you're breaking that glass ceiling. And I'm lucky that 2020, I had a good year. And was able to progress. But yeah, I mean, who's to say what's going to come in the future? As long as I'm still learning and doing different things and new experiences, I'll be happy. So we'll see where that takes me.
Okay. Well, by our understanding, you actually had a great year in 2020. You won the Marketer of the Year with the Cannes Line International Festival of Creativity. Am I right in saying that?
Bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now it wasn't me on my own. I didn't win it single-handedly. But yeah, I suppose to explain, because possibly maybe somebody listening might not know, but you'll probably be aware of the Cannes Line Festival of Creativity that happens kind of every year in Cannes on like a global level. And that is, I suppose, predominantly for brands to enter campaigns and creative excellence for awards. But IAPI, the Institute for Advertising Practitioners in Ireland, they run this series of Young Line competitions. So there's 7 different categories, I think. Like for most of them, you'd be working in an agency. There's like a design category, film category, but they also have this category called the Young Marketers. So that's the competition that I entered alongside Oisín. So the whole idea of the competition is that I suppose there's this kind of misconception in the marketing world sometimes that the creativity happens in agencies, and that you're more of a project manager when you're working on the client side. So the whole idea of this competition is that they put emphasis on how there is creativity in young marketers. So we entered, as a team of 2, you have to be in a team of 2 to be under 30. And we were given a brief which we had to come up with a creative solution for as Fáilte Ireland, but it was for a non-for-profit organisation. Sorry, this is a bit complicated. I hope you're following me. But Oisín and I entered together, and we were given a brief that was for CyberSafe Ireland. And similar to what you're well familiar with, it was a situation where we went to this briefing with loads of different young marketers from different brands, and we were briefed on a Friday afternoon, and we had to have our presentation submitted on the Sunday evening. So it was very it was a very pressurizing situation to do the whole process start to finish. But yeah, what we had to do was I clicked straight back into MDP mode, which was great to have those skills. And as well, I had learned so much, I suppose, on my team in Fáilte Ireland, like since I had joined in September. It was February when that happened. And luckily my manager and my head of marketing in Fáilte Ireland, I believe that we absolutely have best practice on our team, and I've been exposed to really good ways of thinking and principles and all of that. So yeah, Oisín and I submitted, and we were shortlisted and then presented to a panel of judges that was all, I suppose, industry experts, and we luckily won that. So the 2 of us joined are the Young Marketers of the Year for 2020. So the outcome of that is that we should have gone to Cannes and entered the competition at a global level. So we would have been Team Ireland and been given a brief, same situation in Cannes. You do the whole process over there, but in 24 hours and on stage. But unfortunately, of course, it didn't happen in 2020. Another casualty like all others. So hopefully, please God, we haven't heard about what's going to happen this year, but I'd hate for it to happen virtually, because I've always seen and dreamed about the idea of going to Cannes and just being exposed to all those amazing talks, and it would just be so good development wise. So yeah, hopefully it happens, but we'll see.
That's amazing though. It sounds like such an amazing experience. Congratulations, that's huge.
Thank
Um,
you.
but yeah, fingers crossed that goes ahead at some point. I know what you mean. It wouldn't be great online, but sure, we'll hopefully go back to normal sometime soon. Um,
God.
so I suppose you said there you kind of clicked into MDP mode when you when you're at that. So I suppose my next question would just be, you know, how do you think the MDP has contributed to your career development?
It's funny, isn't it? Like, there's obviously all the interpersonal skills that, I mean, they just are completely accelerated while you're there because they just have to be. Um, you kind of have to like survive to thrive, I think, in terms of just like dealing with people and different personalities and approaches to work and everything. But while I was there, and I don't even know if I realized at the time, but the biggest learning that I had that was important for my development while I was there was like understanding my strengths, because when you go into a job and like, hello, here's me saying when you go into a job, I'm literally like a year and a half out, like no expert. I mean, you guys have done amazing things yourselves, but I don't want to come across as being preachy, but I suppose I knew when I went into the team that I didn't know everything. I had loads to learn, but I knew what my strengths were. And I think playing to your strengths is something that you really learn to do in the MDP. And it's that means that when you go into a team, like when I went into my team in Fáilte Ireland, I was like, okay, well, how can I add value to this team and how can I make myself stand out? Like, what are my key differentiators? And I did have the opportunity to show what they were, and I suppose that's how really you differentiate yourself on your team. And then luckily then my team started to realize what they were, and I've continued to grow and develop in the role. But it's definitely learning, I think, what your key strengths are is the best development you can have, or the best way to set yourself up for your career, because you're absolutely put to the test in the MDP. So you do a lot of, I think, self evaluation while you're there. And I think learning agility as well is the other thing, like the pace that you learn on the MDP without even realizing sometimes that they are learnings is amazing. And I know my manager would often say to me that like she really finds that my learning agility and being quick to kind of, I suppose, understand things is something that she thinks is great. So yeah, I think that that'd be the main thing really. And as well, the fact that I think it's hammered into the MDP that like you're on a lifelong journey of education in marketing, and it's so true. Like I look at how much I've learned in just, what is it, nearly 18 months of working, not even 15 months. And I'm like, who was I last January? You're constantly learning, and that is something that you just have to actively be on top of, and staying on top of kind of new trends and principles and ideas and theories, and I suppose keeping an ear to the ground and all of that. So they're probably the things that set me up the best, I would say.
Okay, that's that is really interesting. So we're running kind of out of time. Before we let you go, I want to get one piece of advice off you for current MDP students, maybe that are currently, like myself and Ashling, making our way through the course.
Advice. Okay, well, as I said, like I am not, not. I don't feel like I'm. I shouldn't be giving you advice. I'm not that much older than you, but I think the biggest thing is, like I said, to just really take this time to reflect after every experience you have in the MDP and know what was it that I brought to the team that made it a success. Like, what was it that I contributed to the team that led to the successful outcome that we had? Because that's a practice that you really have to get into in order to fully understand what your strengths are, because that's how you build confidence. Like, I know I had a bit of an imposter syndrome when I started working. I was a bit like, oh, I mean, I have so much to learn, but I feel like I've come so far. You know, you're a bit like, and then even recently, like I was promoted in my job, which I was delighted about, and I'd worked so hard for it, but I was a bit like, oh, I'm not that long out of college, like I'm still have so much to learn. So I think knowing your strengths helps you have confidence, and having confidence is definitely key. So for any MDP, I would say know your strengths, be confident in them, and ask for help. Ask anybody for help that anybody that can help you, where you want to go, how you want to get there. Just keep asking questions and be curious along your way.
Okay, very good. Aoife, look, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. I've learned a lot from you anyway in that short bit of time, so thanks very much for joining us.
Well, that's good, and best of luck to the two of you.
Thank you so much.